Hiya, folks! So, I'm going to be recording these from a totally different part of the house now. My computer's got serviced recently, so my hard drive was wiped, so I managed to find the exact same program. I still got my webcam. I'm going to be switching to a solid-state drive soon. Apparently, they're better than physical disk. I wasn't aware that solid-state was a thing. So feel free to make fun of me or criticize me for not knowing about solid state. Go for it. I really don't care. If you don't know, you don't know. But anyway, let us proceed. So I think I need to really talk to you guys about the absolute horror that is China. Probably one of my least favorite places in the world. And this makes it even worse when you hear about someone who, a protester who was arrested and was tied to a bed and brought into a hospital where he could only look up in horror as they extracted his organs while he was still alive. First it was 2 kidneys, then it was his eyes. These people are sick. Okay? And this particular article is entitled, "A Million People Are Jailed at China's Gulags. I Managed to Escape. Here's What's Really Goes on inside." And this is from Haaretz, a new source. Anyway. Rape, torture, and human experiments. Seiragul Siotbe offers first-hand testimony from a Xinjiang re-education camp. 20 prisoners live in one small room. They are handcuffed, their heads shaved. Every move is monitored by ceiling cameras. A bucket in the corner of the room is their toilet. The daily routine begins at 6 a.m. They are learning Chinese, memorizing propaganda songs, and confessing to invented sins. They range in age from teenagers to elderly. Their meals are meager, cloudy soup, and a slice of bread. Torture. Metal nails, fingernails pulled out, electric shocks takes place in the black room. Punishment is a constant. The prisoners are forced to take pills and get injections. It's for disease prevention, the staff tell them, but in reality they are the human subjects of medical experiments. Many of the inmates suffer from cognitive decline. Some of the men become sterile. Women are routinely raped. Such is life in China's re-education camps, as reported in rare testimony provided by Seiragul Siotbe, pronounced Seiragul Sotbe, or Sotbai, as in by. A teacher who escaped from China and was granted asylum in Sweden. Few prisoners have succeeded in getting out of the camps and telling their story. Sotbai's testimony is even more extraordinary because during her incarceration, she was compelled to be a teacher in the camp. China wants to market its camps to the world as places of educational programs and vocational retraining. But Sotbai is one of the few people who can offer credible first-hand testimony in what really goes on in the camps. The journalist behind this article says they met with Sotbai 3 times, once in a meeting arranged by a Swedish Uyghur Association, and twice after she agreed to tell her story to Haaretz. In personal interviews that took place in Stockholm and lasted several hours altogether, Sotbai spoke only Kazakh, and so they communicated via a translator, but it was apparent that she spoke in a credible way. During most of the time we spoke, she was composed, but at the height of her recounting of the horror, tears welled up in her eyes. Much of what she said corroborated previous testimony by prisoners who had fled to the West. Sweden granted her asylum because in the wake of her testimony, extradition to China would have placed her in mortal danger. This seems to be a common phenomenon in communism and communist countries. These sorts of civil rights abuses that, after a time, become insanely out of hand. As if China wasn't a horrible place enough, it gets even worse from here. She is a 43-year-old Muslim of Kazakh descent who grew up in Mongolkur County near the China-Kazakh border. Like hundreds of thousands of others, most of them Uyghurs, a minority ethnic Turkic group. She too fell victim to China's suppression of every sign of an isolationist thrust in the northwest province of Xinjiang. A large number of camps have been established in the region over the past 2 years. as part of the regime's struggle against what it terms the three evils: terrorism, separatism, and extremism. According to Western estimates, between 1 and 2 million of the province's residents have been incarcerated in camps during Beijing's campaign of oppression. Now, I understand why you might want to discourage your people from terrorism, and certainly extremism. Separatism can be a fine thing if you're living in a state like China, where it's absolutely just a horror story every day. That's the sound of the cat whining, if you can hear it. Shut up! But, yeah. As bad as terrorism and extremism can be, an authoritarian solution, in my mind, is no solution at all. The people should offer the solution, not the government. Once the government starts handling every little thing, you get new legislation. That's just a new way they can control and regulate your behavior. And in a state like China, which is so completely authoritarian, that's just par for the course. As a young woman, Satbai completed medical studies and worked in a hospital. Subsequently, she turned to education and was employed in the service of the state in charge of 5 preschools. Even though she was in a settled situation, she and her husband had planned for years to leave China with their 2 children to neighboring Kazakhstan. But the plan encountered delays, and in 2014 the authorities began collecting the passports of civil servants, Satbai among them. 2 years later, just before passports from the entire population were confiscated, her husband was able to leave the country with the children. Satbai hoped to join them in Kazakhstan as soon as she received an exit visa, but it never arrived. Well, of course it didn't. They're trying to keep her there. She's useful to the party. At the end of 2016, the police began arresting people at night, secretly. Satbai related it was a socially and politically uncertain period. Cameras appeared in every public space. The security forces stepped up their presence. At one stage, DNA samples were taken from all members of minorities in the region, and our telephone SIM cards were taken from us. One day we were invited to a meeting of senior civil servants. There were perhaps 180 people there, employees in hospitals and schools. Police officers reading from a document announced that re-education centers for the population were going to open soon in order to stabilize the situation in the region. By stabilization, the Chinese were referring to what they perceived as a prolonged separatist struggle waged by the Uyghur minority. Terrorist attacks were perpetrated in the province as far back as the 1990s and the early 2000s, following a series of suicide attacks between 2014 and 2016. Beijing launched a tough no-holds-barred policy. In January 2017, they started to take people who had relatives abroad. Satbai says, "They came to my house at night, put a black sack on my head, and brought me to a place that looked like a jail. I was interrogated by the police officers who wanted to know where my husband and children were, and why they had gone to Kazakhstan. At the end of the interrogation, I was ordered to tell my husband to come home, and I was forbidden to talk about the interrogation." Yeah, you migrate to China, they don't even want you to leave. Go figure. This is exactly the kind of thing you would expect from an authoritarian communist power. Now, I don't particularly like Middle Easterners at the best of times. I like Islam even less. But can we really claim the moral high ground over the Middle Easterners when we're basically allowing China to treat them like this? Or even treating them like this at all? Where you can just arrest them on the spot anytime, anywhere, do all kinds of horrible abuses? I wouldn't even wish that on my worst enemy. I wouldn't even. Satbai had heard that in similar cases, people who returned to China had been arrested immediately and sent to a camp. With that in mind, she broke off contact with her husband and children after her release. Time passed and the family did not return, but the authorities did not let up. She was repeatedly taken in for a nocturnal interrogation and false accused of various offenses. Throwing everything against the wall and seeing what sticks? Classic. I had to be strong, she says. Every day when I woke up, I thanked God, Allah, that I was still alive. The turning point came in late 2017, in November 2017. I was ordered to report to the address in the city suburbs to leave a message at a phone number. That is, the journalist behind the article had been given to wait for the police. After Sought-By arrived at the designated place and left the message, 4 armed men in uniform arrived again, covered her head, and bundled her into a vehicle. After an hour's journey, she arrived in an unfamiliar place that she soon learned was a re-education camp, which would become her prison in the months that followed. She was told she had been brought there in order to teach Chinese, and was immediately made to sign a document that set forth her duties and the camp's rules. She says, "I was very much afraid to sign," Sought-By recalls. It said that if I did not fulfill my task, or if I did not obey the rules, I would get the death penalty. The document said that it was forbidden to speak with prisoners, forbidden to laugh, forbidden to cry. You're forbidden to laugh, which is an involuntary action as far as I know. It's always been involuntary for me. One does not choose to laugh unless they are faking it. Forbidden to cry, also an involuntary action. And forbidden to answer questions from anyone. I signed because I had no choice, and then I received a uniform and was taken to a tiny bedroom with a concrete bed and a thin plastic mattress. There were 5 cameras on the ceiling, one in each corner and another one in the middle. You know they're really going on an authoritarian power trip when they literally try to prevent you from carrying out an involuntary action like laughing and crying. What's next? Are they gonna forbid you from experiencing pain? Actually, I wouldn't be surprised. The other inmates, those who weren't burdened with teaching duties, endured more stringent conditions. There are almost 20 people in a room of 16 square meters. She says there were cameras in the rooms, too, and also in the corridor. Each room had a plastic bucket for a toilet. Each prisoner was given 2 minutes a day to use the toilet, and the bucket was emptied only once a day if it filled up. He had to wait until the next day. The prisoners wore uniforms and their heads were shaved. Their hands and feet were shackled all day, except when they had to write. Even in sleep they were shackled, and they were required to sleep on the right side. Anyone who turned over was punished. Wow. Ugh. That one's clearly designed to break you, because everyone knows that, at least I know, that sleeping on the left side, towards your liver, is the most comfortable position. That's the one I fall asleep in every night. That one's designed to ruin your sleep so they can break you more easily. They're literally trying to break you down and break down all barriers so that they can mold you and recreate you in their image. That's actually a very cult-like tactic. It's the same sort of manipulative tactics that you see registered inside the side of the bite model. It's the same shit. But Sought-By had to teach the prisoners, who were Uyghur or Kazakh speakers, Chinese and Communist Party propaganda songs. She was with them throughout the day. The daily routine began at 6 a.m. Chinese instruction took place after a paltry breakfast, followed by repetition and rote learning. There were specified hours for learning propaganda songs and reciting slogans from posters, such as "I love China, thank you to the Communist Party, I am Chinese," and "I love Xi Jinping." The afternoon and evening hours were devoted to confessions of crimes and moral offenses. Between 4 and 6 p.m., the pupils had to think about their sins. Almost everything could be considered a sin, from observing religious practices and not knowing the Chinese language or culture, to immoral behavior. Inmates who did not think of sins that were severe enough or didn't make up something were punished. After supper, they would continue dealing with their sins. When the pupils finished eating, they were required to stand facing the wall with their hands raised and think about their crimes again. At 10 o'clock, they had 2 hours for writing down their sins and handing in the pages to those in charge. The daily routine actually went on until midnight, and sometimes the prisoners were assigned guard duty at night. The others could sleep from midnight until 6. Sought-By estimates that there were about 2,500 inmates in the camp. The oldest person she met was a woman of 84, the youngest a boy of 13. There were school children and workers, businessmen, writers, nurses and doctors, artists and simple peasants who had never been to the city. She's been asked, do you know which camp you were in? She says, I have no idea where the camp was located. During my time there, I was not allowed to leave the grounds even once. I think it was a new building because it had a great deal of exposed concrete. The rooms were cold. Having connections with others was forbidden. Men and women were separate in the living spaces, but during the day they studied together. In any case, there were police who supervised everything everywhere. So there were even children in these places being treated like this. And further, when you're being accused of falsities, if you do not resist, one leading question is all it takes to create a false memory. And before long, you actually start to believe it. These people are literally being forcibly reprogrammed to develop feelings of guilt and regret for things they never even did. This is pretty sickening, folks. This is very sickening. What did you eat? There were three meals a day. All the meals included watery rice soup or vegetable soup and a small slice of Chinese bread. Meat was served on Fridays, but it was pork. The inmates were compelled to eat it, even if they were religiously observant and did not eat pork. Refusal brought punishment. The food was bad. There weren't enough hours for sleep, and the hygiene was atrocious. The result of it all was that the inmates turned into bodies without a soul. Like I said, this is literally designed to break people so that they can be reshaped and molded. So they go on to ask, why were people tortured? She says they would punish inmates for everything. Anyone who didn't follow the rules was punished. Those who didn't learn Chinese properly or who didn't sing the songs were also punished. And every day, things like these were punished with torture? I will give you an example. There was an old woman in the camp who had been a shepherd before she was arrested. She was taken to the camp because she was accused of speaking with someone from abroad by phone. This was a woman who not only did not have a phone, she didn't even know how to use one. On the page of sins the inmates were forced to fill out, she wrote that the call she had been accused of making never took place. In response, she was immediately punished. I saw her when she returned. She was covered with blood and she had no fingernails and her skin was flayed. For those of you who don't know, that means pieces of her skin were physically torn off. On one occasion, Satbai herself was punished. One night, about 70 new prisoners were brought to the camp, she recalls. One of them was an elderly Kazakh woman who hadn't even had time to take her shoes. She spotted me as being Kazakh and asked for my help. She begged me to get her out of there, and she embraced me. I did not reciprocate her embrace, but I was punished anyway. I was beaten and deprived of food for 2 days. Yeah. Like I've said, this is not even a thing I would wish on my worst enemy. This is the kind of thing that would make me struggle to keep my lunch in my stomach. It would appear that the camp itself was located in a place called Dabancheng. And by 2018, the place just got huge. There's lots of people being detained there. Satbai says she was witness to medical procedures being carried out on inmates with no justification. She thinks it was done as part of human experiments that were carried out in the camp systematically. The inmates would be given pills or injections. They were told it was to prevent diseases, but the nurses told me secretly that the pills were dangerous and that I should not take them. So even the nurses were objecting to this horrible, horrible stuff. There was a story here of a 30-year-old Uyghur woman who was held in camps for 4 years and now lives in Turkey. Related that she was raped a number of times by guards and became pregnant twice, but both pregnancies were forcibly aborted. Any woman or man under the age of 35 was raped and sexually abused. So I guess 35 was the cutoff. Another woman who was 40, was incarcerated in the camp for a year and a half, told the postguards that the guards would enter and put bags on the heads of the ones they wanted. A Kazakh guard managed to smuggle out a letter in which he related where the rapes at his Xinjiang camp took place. There were 2 tables in the kitchen, one for snacks and liquor, and the other for doing things. Yeah. Go figure. Now, there does seem to be a bit of a curtain of secrecy. The Xinjiang region, northwestern China, is very large, spanning an area larger than France, Spain, and Germany combined. Well, as a nation, China's huge. But it is home to more than 20 million people. About 40% of the population is Han Chinese, China's ethnic majority. But the majority in Xinjiang are ethnic minorities, mostly Turkic Muslim groups. The largest of these is the Uyghurs, who constitute about half the region's population. Other ethnic groups include Kazakhs, Kyrgyz, and others. Xinjiang became part of the People's Republic of China in 1949 and received an autonomous status in recent decades. The region has experienced dramatic social, political, and economic changes. Formerly a traditional agricultural area, Xinjiang is now undergoing rapid industrialization and economic growth, powered by the production of minerals, oils, and natural gas, and by the fact that this is a major hub of the Belt and Road Initiative, which is an important part of China's global economic expansion. Since the 1950s, the Chinese government has invested heavily in Xinjiang, says Magnus Fiscajo, an anthropologist from Cornell University who specializes in ethnic minorities in China. A large part of this investment is managed by a government military enterprise called Bingtuan, short for the Xinjiang Production and Construction Corps, whose activity, together with various economic and political measures taken by the central government, created resentment among the local population. They were discriminated against and were becoming a minority in their own land. Because the authority moved masses of Han Chinese to Xinjiang, he explains the tension between the minority peoples and Han Chinese. There's not only a result of religious feelings or a specific economic enterprise, it stems from a wide range of Chinese policies that the native population does not benefit from. Tensions reached a boiling point on several occasions, and in some cases deteriorated into organized violence and terror attacks. To finish this off, this is a very long article, but there is a charge of treason. Seirugul Sotbai's story took a surprising turn in March 2018. With no prior announcement, she was informed that she was being released. Again, her head was covered with a black sack. Again, she was bundled into a vehicle, but this time she was taken home. At first, the orders was clear. She was to resume her former position as director of 5 preschools in her home region of Aksu, and she was instructed not to say a word about what she had been through. On her 3rd day back on the job, however, she was fired and again brought in for interrogation. She was accused of treason and of maintaining ties with people abroad. The punishment for people like her, she was told, is reeducation, only this time she would be a regular inmate in a camp and remain there for a period of 1 to 3 years. She says that she was told that before being sent to the camp, I should return home so as to show my successor the ropes. She says at this stage I hadn't seen my children for 2.5 years, and I missed them very much, having already been in a camp. I knew what it meant. I knew I would die there, and I could not accept that. I am innocent. I did nothing bad. I worked for the state for 20 years. Why should I be punished? Why should I die there? Well, you shouldn't. The Chinese government is a horrible, disgusting, depraved institution. The fact that it's even permitted to exist at this point is a crime in itself. And I sincerely hope that the protesters in China that are out now, I sincerely hope that they succeed in overthrowing the entire system. The entire system. Shouldn't even exist. Anyway, peace!